With three races to go, Red Bull seal the deal with their second four-time world champion, Max Verstappen, in doing exactly what he needed to do to take the world championship for a fourth time in a row, aping Sebastian Vettel from 2013. Um, Welcome to Grid Talk. My name is Owen Medford, and today we're here to discuss the Las Vegas Grand Prix. Joining me today, we have Grid Talk co-host Aaron Harper
Good morning.
and co-host of the Monkey Seat podcast and Grid Talk, Tom Horrocks.
Hello.
Before we get into the episode, we must thank our sponsor for this episode, BetOnline. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. With the largest selection of odds on everything from football, NBA, and college basketball, NHL to UFC and MMA, head to BetOnline today to get in on the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. BetOnline, the game starts here. And be sure to follow us on our social media channels at Grid Talk UK. We're available on all the social media platforms with the app. And if you're feeling extra generous, please consider supporting us on Patreon for exclusive access and behind the scenes content. Now, as I mentioned in the pre-show, before the intro there, Max Verstappen has taken his fourth world championship. Now, Aaron, I'll start with you. It's kind of impressive. It's not been as maybe easy and dominant as it has been in the past, but uh, obviously there's been sort of talks of an sort of assault on the world championship by Lando Norris. But has it ever sort of been realistic, or was this result today always kind of inevitable?
Verstappen was always favourite from the moment he started the season like a house on fire, winning, what was it, seven races out of the first eight or nine? It was a really impressive start to the season. He got a lot of points on the board. And when you're playing catch up like that, even in a 24 race championship, it is incredibly difficult to make up that ground. We've seen it in years gone by where teams have got off to a great start. Think of Jenson Button winning six of the first seven races in 2009. And even though Red Bull had the fastest car for much of the second half of the season, they couldn't catch up because other teams were also improving. And that's a situation that Red Bull have found themselves in. They had the points on the board with Verstappen. Other teams were improving. Competition grew, so the wins were being spread more sort of evenly. If it had just been McLaren winning all the races and they had been the only team to really emerge as challengers, I think we'd still be looking at a championship fight. But we're not. Max Verstappen is world champion. Congratulations to him. I think this is a championship that he has won. Not that not to diminish any of his other titles, but this is the one where you can truly see he made the difference because there were weekends where the car wasn't good enough and he used his skill and his speed and his sort of relationship with the team to improve the car, get it into a position where he could get the best possible result. Think back to Singapore. They were nowhere on Friday in Singapore. He puts it at the front of the grid for the race, finishes second, minimizes the points damage that Lando can do on that day. And then, obviously, last time out in Brazil, he was absolutely magnificent in the rain, untouchable on that day. Today, he knew he just had to finish ahead of Lando Norris, and he did just that. P5 on the road. You know, as a Lewis Hamilton fan, I know exactly how valuable a P5 in a championship decider can be. So, yeah, sometimes you just have to do what you need to do. And I think that's the thing he's learned this year is you can't always go for the win. You need to actually just bank the points and bank as many of them as you can. And that actually makes him a more dangerous prospect for future seasons because now he's got that sort of weapon in his arsenal. He will just be more consistent. He will be more difficult to beat, and you will have to win all the races and some to defeat him.
Yeah, as Aaron said, obviously, like he's done an astounding job, and with a Red Bull that has at times not, I think it was 10 races where they went without a win, which seems ridiculous given the state of the car last year. Um, Tom, what I sort of wanted to ask you was, do you think it's one of those things you kind of have to learn, and he's sort of matured from just a fast driver in the 8 years he's been in the car, to that sort of well-rounded, actually, sorry, 9 years, I apologize, into this well-rounded package that seems kind of impervious at this point.
Yeah, I still think he's not quite the absolute perfect package that Aaron's alluded to there, because we've seen this year, although he has learnt to temper his enthusiasm a little bit, we've still seen the old Max Verstappen coming out on multiple occasions this year where he hasn't had the maturity to just think, well, look, let's let this one go. And what we found him doing when he was coming under a bit of pressure from Norris was he was screwing his own races to stop Norris and then allowing Ferrari back into the fight. So I still think he's not quite absolutely perfect in that element. But let's be honest, he is a cut above anyone on the grid this year with regards to his ability. Him and Red Bull, when it comes to weekends optimization, have been phenomenal. There's been very few occasions where Red Bull have dropped the ball this season, and when they have, he's picked it up and ran with it. He's just an absolute phenomenal talent, and when he does get that last element in his arsenal, he will be like the greatest of all time, in my opinion. That's just the one thing that's still slightly lacking from saying, we've seen people rattle off 4 championships in a row. We've seen it happen 4 times in the past. Obviously, Fangio, Schumacher, Hamilton, and Vettel. Now, obviously, one of those 4 didn't really live up to the expectation that we thought. He was like, Vettel was going to go and eclipse Schumacher, was what we were expecting, but he didn't have that in his arsenal, and so Verstappen could go that way, or he could go the other way and add that to his arsenal, and then just completely eclipse Schumacher and Hamilton's records. He's young enough to do it. If he ends up leaving Red Bull for another team, and then he ends up acing the regulations like Hamilton did in 2014, then we could see that happen absolutely in the next few years. So it's an interesting time to see what happens next for Verstappen. He's closed out this championship. He's been by far the best driver all season and thoroughly deserves it, which is very painful for me to say, but he absolutely does. It's been great to see the emergence of McLaren this season, but Red Bull still deserve it. And to be fair, they deserve the Constructors' Championship as well. But, that's not happened, and we all know why. So I know we're not going to talk about him, so I won't go into it. But yeah, no. But to summarize, yeah, Verstappen, I can't say enough good things about him in that element. He's done everything he needed to do this year.
5 years we've been doing this podcast, and I still managed to mute myself and then start talking over myself. But you put it very, very well, Tom. Is he has made the difference. um, Now, it seems unfair, sort of, that we have to, that we start with Red Bull and particularly Max Verstappen, when Mercedes have finally, I think it's partially due to some sort of track dependence, a little bit. The conditions seem to favour them in certain ways, but Mercedes take just a dominant 1-2 in this Grand Prix, Aaron. Yes, you can say that the Mercedes works well in cold conditions. They were able to close it up, and make it more slippery in a straight line. Um, and the Las Vegas Strip is very, very smooth, and obviously this is basically a brand new circuit. Um, but that would be taking away from what I think has been a performance that sort of kind of apes the Mercedes that we used to know.
Yeah, it's a throwback to the dominant days of a decade ago, isn't it? Where Mercedes would just put the car on track and they'd be seconds faster than anything else that could run in the same competition as them. Yeah, it's probably their most dominant victory since the sort of late 2020 season, maybe 2021 at some points with Lewis Hamilton. And yeah, the car worked well and it suited the conditions that were presented to it. I'm not necessarily sure the layout fundamentally suits the car, but they put the car on track and they were fast. They didn't quite understand why, but still, you need drivers who can do the job. And look at the performance of George Russell. He had that little squabble with Charles Leclerc, checked out 2, 3, 4 seconds. Before you know it, he was 8 seconds clear because the Ferraris were ruining their tyres. And from that point on, the TV direction wasn't interested in him. That's the biggest compliment you can get when you're leading the race, that you're not shown on TV because you're just there. You're going to go and win it, barring a disaster. So, yeah, I mean, he did say in the post-race interview that he was just waiting for something to happen, like a safety car or a red flag. But we didn't get any of that today. It was a very clean race, and I think George will be thanking his lucky stars for that one. But just to sort of ram home the point that it wasn't, I Mercedes in clear air was great. Lewis came through from P10 to finish second. And we've said it once, we've said it a million times about Lewis Hamilton. He is a phenomenal overtaker. He can move himself through the pack. And we saw that again. Yeah, you've got the big DRS straight, but they all benefit from that in different ways. You've still got to show the pace, get out of DRS range so you're not re-overtaken. And yeah, I think that just rammed home the point that the Mercedes was the car to have this weekend. And the weird thing is they'll go to Qatar next week and they'll end up like ninth on the grid and out in Q1, and they'll just go, we have no idea. And we're at a track that could suit them a bit more. It's, yeah, because George was saying after qualifying, they're expecting to be fast there, but who knows? Who knows? It's such a, these cars are such on a knife edge with the setup and the way they interact with the track surface. I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing for the sport because you never quite know what you're going to get and you can have too much unpredictability. But for today, Mercedes were the class act, and Toto Wolff can go home a very happy man. He doesn't have to smash any tables or throw headsets at the wall. But it's a good day to be a Mercedes fan, and we'll enjoy it while it's here because we haven't had many in recent times. But yeah, fair play to Mercedes, to George Russell, and to Lewis Hamilton. An excellent performance all round from the team.
Yeah. I said to myself I'll refrain from any sort of from any gambling based cliches, but it does seem to have been just a roll of the dice for Mercedes across, I mean, multiple seasons. But as much as it's scary to not know why you're fast, as much as it is to not know why you're slow. Um, yeah, great weekend. Hopefully your prediction doesn't come true for Qatar, but it would be a wonderful send off for Mercedes to close this chapter and hopefully figure out what they're doing and what they're doing wrong. Now I think we've talked about two teams who very clearly have got the operational side of things correct. And as much as Ferrari fighting with McLaren in the 12 Championship, this is now sort of the main fight that matters to each of these drivers, but sorry, to each of these teams. Sort of McLaren seem to not know how to win, Tom. Not know how to execute a season. Ferrari seemingly didn't, but they've got better. Um, McLaren have kind of gone off the boil, and Ferrari just kind of seemed that slight bit more, what's the word? Able, I would say, to get things done. It was great it was just a great weekend for Ferrari. Is there anything McLaren can really do, just during this fight at all from this point onwards?
I think so. I think this was, out of the last 5 races, this was always going to be the one that McLaren were like, do you know what? It's damage limitation. We're just going to try and do what we can. They were a distant, they were a distant sixth place with Lando Norris. It wasn't like there was nothing really he could have done. He did his best to stay with them in the early section of the race. Oscar Piastri did really well to not fall back in the pack with that 5-second penalty, to come through that 5-second penalty and then still be in the position that he was prior to the pit stops was pretty well executed from McLaren. So I think they did well there. They went early with the committing to the 2-stop. Piastri was the first man in on a 2-stopper, apart from Alonso, who did a crazy start on soft tyres, but we're not talking about them. So it was well executed day for McLaren with what they had available to them. I don't think anything else was in the pack that they could have shuffled and dished out. Sorry, I know you said no gambling puns, but yeah, there was nothing else in there they could have done. I don't think this was what they had. If this was a Haas, everyone would be lauding them, saying what a well executed race they'd done. But because we used to see McLaren at the front, they're not at the front this weekend. They might have been had Red Bull not cried about the rear wing. which they had to remove, and this would have been the first race they'd have used it since it got removed. The second DRS flap thingy. So it was always going to be damage limitation for them. So I think when you look at the way the race panned out for Ferrari and McLaren, I would say McLaren did a better job optimizing than Ferrari. You've got the Ferraris doing a really dangerous switcheroo and then not being ready for Sainz, having to cut across the pit lane exit, which, as you said before we started, how was that not a penalty? You know, it wasn't even investigated. So I think it was a little bit of it didn't affect the end result for Ferrari, because I think where they finished would be where they'd finished had they executed everything correctly anyway. But on another day, they've cost Carlos Sainz 5 or 6 seconds in lost optimized race time, and also having to give up the place to Leclerc, go through the pit lane entry, and then duck back out again. And then, which allowed Hamilton through. I said Hamilton would have gone through anyway. I don't think anything changed on that. But on another day, they've lost a few positions with that, and then McLaren have optimized. So I'm not concerned in that front. Now, going into this race weekend, McLaren had a 36-point lead over Ferrari. They've now got a 24-point lead. The Ferrari need to take 12 points a weekend out of McLaren. Now, this is a race that everyone was expecting Ferrari to be the quickest. They weren't. Everyone was expecting McLaren to be awful. Okay, they weren't amazing. But next weekend is Qatar, where everyone's expecting McLaren to be the favourites. So if we come out of Qatar and Ferrari have closed in 12 points on McLaren again, then going into Abu Dhabi, I'm concerned. But I do think that with next weekend in Qatar, it's going to be a completely different story. And if McLaren optimise, then it's going to be very much ticking the box going into Abu Dhabi. I think we might see like a back up to a 20-25 point gap again to Ferrari after that. So I think McLaren, they're definitely going to be aware of the threat of Ferrari, but know that they've got enough to close it out, because I think Ferrari is a bit peakier than the McLaren, and this was always going to be McLaren's worst race. So I think they're fine. I think they just need to be mindful. They need to optimize, be aware of not getting involved in fights that don't concern them. Fortunately, they don't have someone ramming them off the track and screwing their own race to stop Lando Norris getting more points anymore, because now that's sorted. We don't have to worry about that. So I think they're in a good position. I think they're in a strong position, and at least they've just got a straight fight with Ferrari. I haven't got to worry about anything else. So as a McLaren fan, I'm not concerned. I'm just aware of the threat.
Yeah, one thing you didn't touch on, obviously we said, how was that not a penalty with Sainz? And I think Red Bull should protest it. I don't know if they will, bearing in mind how they feel about the constructors, clearly. Aaron, what I do want to talk about is, I know it wouldn't have changed things at the end of the day, but can you shed any light on what that Piastri penalty for the it was a false start, and I think there's a number of different categories that infringements at the start can fall into, but to my eye from the onboard, and it's a bit hard to see on the main shot. Is there anything that Piastri, as far as we can see, that actually did wrong that's explained away by the decision documents from the FIA or anything like that?
I haven't looked at the decision documents, but from what I saw on the TV footage, he looked, to all intents and purposes, inside his grid box. It wasn't as egregious as Sergio Perez's one in Mexico, where he was clearly too far forwards. I know that there's a sensor in the grid box where the yellow line is, so maybe he's triggered that by mistake. Maybe there was might have been faulty. You never know. But the penalty is the penalty. It's 5 seconds. I don't think it's actually changed his result. I think he would have finished there anyway, in a weird quirk of how F1 is at the moment, because you've got such a big gap between the top 4 teams and everybody else. There was a time where Aston Martin would have been able to pinch that position, but they're having their own nightmares with the car, and it just seemed to be downgrading all the time. But yeah, it's weird. So, like you say, there's a number of different start line procedure penalties that you can incur. The most obvious one is a jump start, where you move away from your grid spot before the lights go out. We've seen that before. The other one is a false start, where the driver goes, realizes they're going, stops, and then goes again. And they usually lose a whole bunch of positions anyway. And the other one is being out of position. We've seen this before it happened to Fernando Alonso, of course, in 2023 at the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, where the drivers were told you have to be inside the white lines. You can't possibly have your car outside of it. And they were then forced to make the grid boxes wider to accommodate for a car that's almost 2 meters wide because, so yeah, they're the three things that could have happened. It was a false start he was noted for. So that implies that he went, stopped, went again, but we didn't get any footage of that. And Tom, I understand you've had a look at the onboard and sort of confirmed that that wasn't the case. So it's slightly odd. I think we'd have to go into the detail of the document sort of ourselves and have a read through it. But they do use a lot of technical jargon, so good luck understanding it. So yeah, it's weird. I think honestly, I think McLaren would be better served petitioning for a penalty against Sainz. Not that I like that, but in this sort of competition, you have to do everything you can. It won't promote them any positions, but it might demote Carlos off the podium and lose Ferrari a few championship points in the constructors, and then that would mean that the current 24-point gap would actually grow before Qatar, and we expect McLaren to be strong there because they were pretty quick. They were winners of the sprint, of course, in Qatar last season with Oscar Piastri. So yeah, McLaren need to get their thinking caps on and sort of play the game a little bit here because yeah, I'm not sure whether they can feel hard done by with the penalty because they ended up where they probably would have ended up anyway. But there's certainly a couple of points on offer in terms of Ferrari losing them if they play the game because they've been caught out with the rear wing thing. I think it's time for them to play it back a little bit. And I know Tom might appreciate that as well.
Yeah. McLaren need to lower themselves to Red Bull's level, maybe over a slight gap in a rear wing, which does gain a performance advantage. But on the other hand, so does a few million extra dollars. Speaking of a few million extra dollars, I'm now going to move on to sort of the fight between Haas, Alpine, and RB. There's only there's under 5 points between those three. And if you're enjoying this podcast, then we would love it if you could take 5 to leave us a 5-star rating on Spotify or a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. And if you're one of the 72% of people who aren't yet subscribed to this channel, what are you doing? Like, we're clearly great. We're putting in the work. We're getting up at 6 a.m. to watch Formula One and then podcast about it. Then consider helping us out with a like and subscribe to see more of the show. Yeah, it's under, like I say, it's under 5 points between the between sixth and eighth. Alpine, ascending, getting that $50 million with their sort of freak performance last time out, Tom. It's almost immediately been sort of eaten up again, and now there's just 1 point between Haas and Alpine. Sort of, which of these three do you sort of see kind of taking the championship? Obviously, RB is a bit of a different one in some ways, but I kind of just I want to get your feeling on sort of Alpine versus Haas. Which of those two sort of work out best for you in the next two races and in this Grand Prix really. They were remarkably well behaved into turn 14.
They were, but my question would be, before the race, Alpine had just checking my notes, had a 3-point lead over Haas, and they had Pierre Gasly starting in, what was he, P3? How have Haas come out of this race ahead of Alpine in the championship? And that is why Haas are still in this fight, because of Alpine's inability to convert. Like, I know they did a great job in Brazil. Fantastic. Don't make a pit stop, have a reasonably fast car. So much spray, no one can overtake. Fantastic. Really, really strong performance there. But this weekend, like, Gasly reported over the radio that he's losing power. And then the mechanic said, nope, everything's fine. 10 seconds later, his engine blows up. That is kind of Alpine in a nutshell. Ocon drives through the pit lane. Oh, there's nobody here. Okay, I'll just keep on going and come in the next lap. But again, just stop in the pit box and wait for your crew. You're going to lose less time doing that than if you go round again and then go in the pit lane again. And now as a result of that, Gasly retiring, Ocon being nowhere due to issues in the pit lane. Like they seem to have just forgotten that they've still got Ocon in the team. And then Haas of Hulkenberg particularly has made their strategy work and got some strong points and moved Haas back ahead again. And Haas have no right being in sixth place in the championship. Like they have done so well this season, and Alpine should be sixth. They've got the car now with the upgrades. They have the car to finish sixth in the championship. I thought this weekend they were just going to drive a nail into the coffin of that fight and just go off into the distance. And then we're looking at Haas and RB fighting it out. And, Sauber hoping for a win in the last race to actually get something from the season. But it just I keep getting surprised by Alpine. I don't know why I keep getting surprised by Alpine, because we've had this for years. They just keep wasting opportunities and not optimizing and throwing things away. And they've done it again this weekend. This was a great opportunity to just put it to bed and then start focusing on next season and trying to improve. But they just keep doing this. And it's an incredibly embarrassing weekend for them, where they've got a lot of their investors would have been in Las Vegas 100%, because they have lots of money. So that's where they'll be, in Las Vegas. And then so to come from the position where they're at, to come away with 0 points and to the embarrassment of just seeing their engine expire, which they're soon going to be getting rid of for Mercedes anyway. And then their driver going through the pit lane just with nobody there waiting for him. It's just an embarrassment. So yeah, I think Haas will hold. I'm going to say Haas will do enough, because I think they're just better at race strategy, which seems insane for this works outfit, that they're just not able to put together a race result. But yeah, no, I'm going to say that Haas are going to hold on, and they're going to score enough points in the last 2 races to go against the much faster Alpine nowadays. But yeah, no, for me, it's going to be Haas.
I think that's a perfect. I think my favourite thing out of that you said perfectly sums up Alpine, which is Ocon. The driver's in the pit lane and nobody's in the pit box. That's just it's just slightly baffling to me that they've managed to do that. Aaron, I'm going to come back to you on. I said we wouldn't talk about it, but we have to. I almost want to book in the show with Perez, really. And it's to hook in a little bit to RB. RB, I think, genuinely had a great weekend this week in Las Vegas. There were multiple times where they were genuinely ahead of Perez, both cars, and it does make you think. Like, obviously, we've asked why is Perez in the seat, but out of these two, is there anything that these two are doing wrong? Because they are really showing, and the team is showing, that they're kind of in the ascendancy, and that I think they can, given how Alpine are, they could genuinely take the race going forward. How sort of is there anything that they're not doing right?
I don't know. I mean, Liam Lawson's still midway through his audition, I suppose. He's the one that Red Bull, I think, want to put in the seat if Perez doesn't cut the mustard, and he's not. I know the Red Bull's a difficult car, and Verstappen was only 5th, but you'd still think Perez is a top quality driver, so people would have you believe, but he's really struggling with that car. Out in Q1 yesterday, just scraping into the points, beaten by a Haas and a V carb, and had Gasly's engine not gone kaput, probably wouldn't have scored a point, because Gasly was going pretty well. He was falling back down the order, but he would have probably ended up in his natural position. Ocon, without the pit stop catastrophe, would probably have finished 10th, 11th, 12th as well. Where did he finish? He finished 17th in the end as a result of that. But yeah, back to Perez. He's making a mountain out of a molehill in terms of keeping this seat. He did it last year. He's doing it again this year. I don't think he's ever truly, really sort of made that seat his own. He had those little purple patches where he's won a few races early in the season, and then it's all fallen away. It's the same thing every year. honestly, I think Red Bull need to make a change. I don't think they will, though, because unless Lawson proves that he's completely ready, then, you know, what do? You got to put him in the seat. But you're going to have to bin off Perez. He comes with a lot of backing, and that's sponsors, and that's extra cash that the Red Bull company itself doesn't necessarily need to put into the team, which means they can spend it elsewhere in the business. It's there's a lot of moving parts, and then you got to spare a thought for Yuki Tsunoda, who has massively improved this season, so much more consistent. He's finished P9, and they don't even want to look at him. The weird thing about this is no one else does either. So maybe that's the real story, is that nobody else is thinking, yeah, let's go and get Sonoda. Let's go and have him, get him out of the Red Bull team because he's clearly not going to get a chance there. They don't want him. So we'll give him a chance. He might flourish like Gasly and Albon have and Sainz has going away. But they also want to bring in Colapinto. They've got Isaac Hadjar. They've got Arvid Lindblad as well, who's a Formula 3 driver, who's very exciting. But they just don't know how to access their potential into a Red Bull seat because they all get chewed up and spat out by Verstappen. It's such a weird situation for Red Bull to be in, that they can apparently only run one car effectively. But give Sergio Perez his credit. He was telling the team about the issues the car had sort of mid-season last year, and they didn't listen to him. So really, they should keep him on because he's given them the feedback that they need to get the car sorted, and they didn't listen to him. So that's their fault. So it's a mess. It's a mess, and yet they've got the world champion driver. But you look at the situation in the Constructors' Championship, and I know Tom said that they deserve the Constructors. I completely disagree with that. They have made a mess with this car. They got off the hook because everybody else started the season slowly. 2025, they need to be much, much better. They need to have Perez firing on all cylinders because he can be a good rear gunner for Verstappen. We've seen it before. But if they have a car anything like the one they've got now, they are going to finish fourth in the World Championship next year. And they won't win the drivers because Verstappen will have far too much to do and there'll be too many drivers to compete against. So Red Bull they've got a lot on their plate, even though they've just clinched the World Championship for the fourth year in a row. It's quite the conundrum. Will Perez be there? I think he will. Should he be there? Leave your answers in the chat and in the comments.
Yeah, I have a theory about the calculus that Red Bull have, and it just seems a little bit different to everyone else, and they just seem to want a Red Bull on the front, on the front row, so they can get it on the front pages, and because of of what they're selling compared to everyone else, it doesn't necessarily matter that they don't take the big bucks, particularly when they seem to have a deal that that supports their second driver. They do seem to be pure marketing in the purest sense, as I've sometimes said about some of these teams. Now, we'll move to your drivers of the day, guys. Obviously, Lewis Hamilton took driver of the day with a very good performance from 10th to second. Do you, Tom, agree with that as your driver of the day?
I do, yeah. I did vote for him in the Grid Talk driver of the day chat. I don't know if he was official driver of the day. I was covered in sick at the checkered flag, so I didn't see anything that happened after that. My son's, not mine, just to clarify, if anyone is wondering. So I'm just looking at the grid. I think you've got to say, like, Alonso did a pretty good job considering he had a terrible strategy. Starting on the soft just seemed insane, and he had to box after just 5 laps and ended up at the back of the grid. So to recover, to make up the same number of places as Sergio Perez in the car that Perez has got, I think that's a good shout from his perspective. No one else really. I mean, Hulkenberg and Tsunoda moving forward a couple of places was reasonable, but Hulkenberg just a one place. But no, I think for me, it is Hamilton. I can't think of anyone else, maybe Verstappen, for holding on. His race pace must have been terrible in that car based on how it was in practice. So the fact that he managed to hold on where he did, potentially a shout there. But no, for me, it's Hamilton. But George Russell, phenomenal job just to close out that win and fight that pressure early doors from Leclerc as well, and then to come back and just dominate the race was good, strong performance as well.
Thanks, Tom. And Aaron, who was your driver of the day?
I'm going to disagree with Tom, actually. I don't think I think Lewis Hamilton did a great job, but I don't think he was the driver of the day. That was George Russell. He dominated this race. I do wonder if he would have won the race if Lewis had started anywhere near the front, front two rows, which he really should have been on, let's be honest. But as has been the tale of his qualifying season, it comes to Q3 and it just doesn't come together for him. Which is weird, a weird thing to say about the bloke who's got the most pole positions in Formula One history with 104, I think it is. But that's most racing at the end of the day. So yeah, George is my driver of the day because I just think he did a great job. He held off Leclerc. He had the bit of rubbish that was stuck to his floor at that point. It would have been easy for him to lose that position, get held up. Who knows what would have happened then? Could have been a very, very different race. And I think in the final stint, he was just pacing himself. I do wonder, though, if he had the true pace to keep Lewis behind, and it would have been great to see them go toe to toe, wouldn't it? But look, George did the job he needed to do. He got pole position, he got away, he held the lead, and he led from the front. So yeah, he did the best job of anybody by definition of he won the race.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think Russell. I mean, obviously, I voted for Lewis Hamilton as driver of the day, but I think George Russell did an absolutely astounding job. Lights to flag, win. I think he did. He said he was just waiting for something to go wrong, and luckily for him, it never did. But I think they were in a position where it wouldn't have mattered. Um, by comparison. And our grid talk driver of the day, what was Lewis Hamilton? All three of us that voted on it. Given the time of the race, I don't. I sort of don't. I can't ever go at anyone for that because I was barely awake at 6 a.m. as these guys know, let alone now. That is the show. Now I'm just going to throw it back to you guys. Obviously, Tom, you're a co-host on here, but it's been a couple of weeks. But I'm really looking forward to for what you have coming up. Where can we find more of your opinions on Formula One?
Yeah, apologies, listeners. Anyone who does listen to Monkey Seat, we've not done a podcast in a few races now, just life in the way and stuff. And I was actually with Carl in person for only the third time since 2021 last night. We were enjoying a good Mexican in London, unlike Red Bull. Yeah, we will be doing a podcast hopefully next week. So yes, tune in for that. You just type in Monkey Seat and you'll find us. Pretty much no one else is going to call their podcast anything stupid like the Monkey Seat. So yeah, it's just us chatting rubbish about Formula One. So yeah, come and give us a listen.
I won't lie, I actually quite like the name Monkey Seat. I'm a bit of a technical nerd, and also I think it works quite well with the premise of the show. Aaron, obviously you're a co-host on here, but where else can we find you?
So I have my own YouTube channel. It's AHGP, where we play F1 Manager. I'm currently in season 4 with my creator team, AHGP. I've actually got Lewis Hamilton driving for me. So yeah, that's been fun. Yeah, so I do a bit of that. We play a bit of F1, the F1 game by EA. I've got my own sort of league where we just sort of have a bit of fun. And I share a few more thoughts and opinions on real world F1 there as well. You can find me on X at Aaron Harper 41. Yeah, for a little bit more from me there. So yeah, come and check out the YouTube channel and hope to see you in one of my streams or in the comments.
Yeah, I always love an hour and a half a stream. I've participated a little bit in some of your online lobbies with your viewers, and that's always good fun. Um, Even if sometimes I have been caught doing Verstappen defending, I do apologise. Um, yeah, if you'd like to hear more Grid Talk is available on YouTube, where most episodes like this one are recorded live, as well as Amazon Fire, Spotify, Apple Music, Verbal, and Pocket Casts. Just search Formula One Grid Talk for our back catalogue of shows with previews and reactions to the race results. Thank you to Jared Bradley and Holly Eagle for supporting our Patreon. And if you want to support the show further, why not sign up to our Patreon for exclusive content? We've just dropped just recently our sort of hosts internal our host Patreon. We really enjoyed that, and we think it's really good. I think there's some clips going up on our social media that you should, give you an idea of what it is. So if you would like more of that, please get subscribed. And also make sure you subscribe so you're the first to know when each new weekly episode is released. We'll be back soon with plenty more F1 content, what with it being a triple header. Thank you very much for the listening. Sorry, I apologize. Thank you very much for listening to the Grid Talk podcast presented by Bet Online, and goodbye.